On Sunday, Sacramento police officers shot and killed 22-year-old Stephon Clark in his grandmother's backyard at the end of a chase in which officers mistook Clark's cell phone for a gun. Citizens' reaction to that killing had a direct impact on the only pro team in town. A day after police released body cam footage of that fatal shooting, protesters organized a march Thursday that began at City Hall and culminated outside the Golden One Center, where the Kings were scheduled to host the Hawks at 7 p.m. local time. The protesters blocked fans from entering the arena. Ultimately, after a nearly half-hour delay to tip-off, the Kings beat the Hawks in front of around 2,000 fans as the rest were turned away for their safety. Elsewhere in sports-related activism, free agent safety Eric Reid, the first NFL player to kneel alongside Colin Kaepernick for the national anthem, says he will not demonstrate in the same manner this season as he searches for a new team. Reid said, quote, "I'm not saying I'm going to stop being active because I won't. I'm just going to consider different ways to be active, different ways to bring awareness to the issues of this country and improve on the issues happening in this country. I don't think it will be in the form of protesting during the anthem. I say during because it's crazy that the narrative changed to the way we were protesting the anthem, and that wasn't the case. I think we're going to take a different approach to how we are going to be active." More First Take right now.
You just heard it, gentlemen. Eric Reid says he won't protest during the national anthem this coming season. Do you have a problem with him saying this, Stephen A.?
I don't have a problem with him saying it. I think it's the smart way to go. And I think that, you know, there are people out there, particularly folks within the African-American community, who need to grow up and understand that there's a difference between talking about somebody as if they're wrong and pointing out reality. Colin Kaepernick was not wrong. Eric Reid was not wrong. But it doesn't take away from the fact that there are going to be repercussions and ramifications for their actions that they may or may not want to deal with. And so as a result, you have to highlight what those ramifications may be and then ask themselves, is it worth it? Eric Reid wants to continue to play in the NFL. They've already sent their message as it pertains to kneeling for the national anthem. There are other things that he can do, and he has been on the record saying there are other things that he will do to bring attention to the causes that he holds near and dear to his heart, and hopefully Colin Kaepernick will do the same. But when you go about the business of doing something that's going to clearly compromise the very brand that's employing you and putting money in your pocket, by the way, a brand which you didn't express a problem with to begin with, which means that you should have no incentive to compromise their bottom line, it is wise of you to take steps back, to modify your position, and to think of different ways to address the concerns that you initially expressed without compromising your bottom line. There are people already, Max, on Twitter and beyond, Stephen A's and Uncle Tom, and Stephen A's a sellout because I'm saying this or I'm saying that. I'm spitting facts. I'm telling you for a fact this is what the owners are going to do to individuals who compromise their bottom line, particularly when your issue was never against the National Football League. They're going to do it like Stephen Ross said it, the owner of the Miami Dolphins. He initially was in support of Colin Kaepernick. He was originally in support of him taking the stance that he took. But once the president hijacked the issue, he said, okay, this is affecting our bottom line. Maybe not totally, as you pointed out, Max. Maybe other things came into the equation, but that had something to do with compromising their bottom line. And they're not going to let it happen again. That's what they're saying. So I think Eric Reid is smart to take a different approach.
There's a couple things here. Number one, Eric Reid should do what he feels is right for him. I'm not going to say that he's doing the wrong thing for him. He's his own individual. It's his life, and he has to make his choices. I will say I have a problem with circumstances if they are forcing him to do this, even though he doesn't want to do it. In other words, even if he feels like he can't continue protesting and have a job in the NFL, if he must parrot the owner's political speech by standing for the anthem in order to play, then I find it sad circumstances, and I don't think it's clearly related to the fact that ownership in the NFL is out of 32 owners, 31 are white. They're all rich, obviously. You have to be rich. And most of them are old men. and old white men, and none of them are African American. And I think it reflects, obviously, inarguably, that is a result of the history of our country, including our history's original sin. And I will point it out every time. It's ironic and a bad thing that the players who are protesting essentially systemic injustice are being silenced in their protest as a result, really, of systemic injustice, which results in the homogeneity of owners, right? In terms of that demographic.
Max,
now, let me say, hold on, let me say that that things never change, Stephen A. When you talk about reality, things never change if you just accept reality. They change when people fight the good fight, and they continue to fight even at personal sacrifice, sometimes great personal sacrifice. Now, the argument may be, guys, things aren't so bad that you need to make enormous personal sacrifice in order to make change. Or they may be, you better really consider whether you're willing to make that sacrifice to make change. But I don't think the argument is ever uniformly, hey, you're going to have to sacrifice in order to make change, therefore be smart about this because one side has a lot of power. I don't like that argument, and I never have.
Well, you don't have to like the argument, but it's a reality that black folks in America have to face every single day. And I personally am sick and tired of seeing sacrifice. And certainly I'm not alluding to history from a civil rights perspective, because we all know that the sacrifices that were made were more than worth it because the situations were dire. But in this particular day and age, when there are so many avenues to provoke and create change, and to do so even while making sacrifices, but not necessarily sacrificing everything that you have worked for. There are ways to go about doing it, and sometimes there's a conduit to that should be somebody other than yourself.
Stephen A,
that can't be ignored.
Stephen A, should Eric Reid have a job? Look, okay, real quick, let me just say, Eric Reid should have a job in the NFL. He's a good player. Number two, the fact that he doesn't reflects that he is being pushed out of the league unfairly. Number three,
we don't know that because there's 4 guys that are considered better than them that are without jobs right now too.
The argument, I'm making that assertion.
Okay.
The argument that he's against the bottom line of the NFL to allow the protests, I don't think has been proven. And number 4, even if it has been proven, this is the argument that store owners made in the South when they refused to serve African Americans. They were told, even if it's not me, I don't feel this way. My customers might. It's bad for my business.
With all due respect, I'm a black man that doesn't need a history lesson on what black folks have gone through from you or anybody else. That's number 1. And number 2, and more importantly, I have spoken to owners. I have spoken to owners who have proclaimed that the protest had a negative impact on their bottom line.
They believe
that's what they told me. They're lying.
Listen,
but that's what they've said.
You know, this conversation is often accused of having it about the things on the surface and not the issues underneath it. The thing that Eric Reid was supposedly protesting for. So that's what we need to do right now, because while that's going on in Sacramento last night, the Kings' home game with the Hawks was delayed 19 minutes when protesters surrounded the Golden One Center last night. A massive crowd formed a human chain to protest the fatal police shooting of Stephon Clark, an unarmed black man who was on a cell phone in his backyard. Kings owner Vivek Ranadive spoke before the game.
We here at the Kings recognize that we have a big platform. It's a privilege, but it's also a responsibility. It's a responsibility that we take very seriously. And we stand here before you, old, young, black, white, brown, and we are all united in our commitment. And we are going to work really hard to bring everybody together to make the world a better place, starting with our own community.
So here it is. In Sacramento, the issues underlying the protest. Max, what's your reaction to how Vivek handled the situation last night?
I think he handled it very well. Will, I think, and Stephen A., I think he handled it very well. And I've been very critical of him as an owner. I don't think he's a good one. But here we see, and Stephen A., this speaks to the owners that you spoke to in the NFL who believe it's affected their bottom line, and they may be right, but they also may be wrong. The evidence is not definitive one way or another. And here's an example, and by the way, in the NFL, it lines up with the owner's personal preferences, and that's really the point. They are gatekeepers, they're in positions of power, and their personal preferences can influence the way they interpret events. words, oh, this affects my bottom line. Well, maybe your reaction to the protests affects the bottom line. For example, look at the way Reid just handled this situation. Ask yourself, how does the NBA handle those situations, and how are they perceived even in terms of social justice issues versus the NFL? And then ask yourself, which league is on the way up and which league is on the way down? That is not, I'm not suggesting that that's definitive evidence either. I'm just suggesting there's evidence on both sides. I like the way Reid handled this situation, and I do believe it counts as some kind of evidence on the side of the ledger where you say, well, okay, the NBA handles this stuff better than the NFL, and it's also good for business.
Max, let me, first of all, I agree with you about Reid, and I applaud the way that he handled this situation. But work for me for a quick second by just answering a couple of these questions quickly. You say the NBA is on the way up, the NFL is on the way down. Is that accurate?
Yes.
When you talk about NBA players, haven't they played a significant role in the peace that has been conveyed and displayed in terms of the league and the players itself being in concert with one another? The players have had something to do with that. What did you say?
Yes, that's because the commissioner has extended olive branches and has done a very good job of helping along that capacity.
Wait a minute. We can say that. We could say that. But what I would say to you in return is that Michelle Roberts, the executive director of the Players Association, in concert with Chris Paul, the president, in concert with guys like LeBron James and others who are the face of the league, were cognizant of affecting their bottom line, this cash cow, and the ultimate impact that they had. So rather than alienate the communities at large out there, what they did was work in concert with the league, be of one mind, be like-minded, come together as one to let everybody know that we're in this with the same reasons, with the same purpose, and the same agenda. So all I'm trying to say to you is this. They did exactly the kind of stuff that I'm alluding to the NFL players should have done. Instead of just being out there and protesting as individuals and being divisive in the eyes of some of your patrons out there, what the players in the NBA, in concert with the league and the owners did was come together in a way that galvanized people as opposed to divide them and look at how they're thriving.
Listen, I understand your point.
While not losing their message.
I'm not saying you and I are on the same page about that, but I will take what you said and deal with that as though I agree, like as though that's true. Let's just assume that what you're saying is 100% true. Then I would say, why is it that Chris Paul and others in the NBA have been able to act in concert with the league to do good, and in the NFL these players haven't? And I would suggest that it might be because Adam Silver and the NBA has done a very good job of making the players feel that they are partners, that they have an equity stake, and the NFL does not treat the players the same way.
May I offer this quickly, Stephen A.? Could it also be that the NBA and the NBA players watched what happened in the NFL first and had the benefit of seeing a way of protesting that did interrupt business and chose a different path?
Yes, that absolutely is true, Will, but let me just throw a ribbon on it all. It can also be that the NBA recognized what it had working for them because they negotiated a collective bargaining deal that they found doable and plausible and beneficial to themselves, whereas the NFL players have a problem with the deal they negotiated and found different ways to vent about it. Where in fact, this is not their real issue. There are other things that collectively will bargain that are their real issues, and they're using these other issues to vent about it.
So you're saying don't kill the golden goose, and the point is the players in the NBA feel the goose is more golden for them than the players in the NFL do.
That's correct.
Or they had the benefit of hindsight. By the way, it's definitely been handled differently. Coming up, we got to run on this one. Coming up, Kemba Walker was on fire last night. So what did the Hornets do that has Max so upset? And Steve Kerr says Steph Curry's ankle won't be 100% for a while. So is Stephen A. finally ready to say this will keep the Warriors out of the finals? You're going to find out next. Stay tuned for First Take.
I'm just worried about the house.